Hi, I'm Chris, the on-farm network agronomist with the Manitoba Pulse and soybean growers. Let's review results from the 2024 field-scale farmer-led soybean inoculant trials. The question is, with more soybean history in Manitoba, have we built up populations in the soil of the rhizobia species Bradyrhizobium japonicum that colonizes soybean root nodules and is responsible for our nitrogen fixation? Remember, these symbiotic nitrogen-fixing rhizobia strains are not native to our soils, and the inoculation is used to introduce them to the soil. For previous research in terms of Bradyrhizobia persistence in the soil, it does survive Manitoba winters well, and the population does decline with time since soybeans were last grown, and this is to be expected. But the interesting part of that is that the rate of decline is related to soybean history. At sites in Carmen and St. Adolphe, where the field had seen soybeans before, the decline of rhizobia over the years was pretty slow. And compare this to Melita that didn't have any soybean history, and the rate of decline was much more rapid. In the on-farm network, we have two types of trials investigating soybean inoculation strategies. The first compares a double inoculation strategy to a single inoculation, and the second compares a single inoculation strategy to no inoculant at all. The choice between these two trial types is dictated by soybean history in the field. As the number of soybean crops growing increases, we may be able to reduce our input costs in terms of inoculant. First, we'll review the double versus single inoculation trials. The goal of this trial type is to quantify the agronomic and economic impacts of seed-applied inoculant alone, or seed or single inoculation strategy versus a double inoculation strategy that combines a seed-applied inoculant with an inoculant in-furrow. We're investigating the question, can we reduce the amount of inoculant we use as we build up this population of Bradyrhizobia in our soils? Ultimately, will we see a nodulation or yield response to that extra cost of inoculant in-furrow? So in 2024, there were two trials comparing a single inoculant and a double inoculant strategy across Manitoba, and they're circled in red on the map. And it's important to note that before participating in these trials, the fields must have seen at least two previous soybean crops and one within the last 4 years. Some background information on these trials. We compared a liquid on seed inoculant to a liquid on seed plus a granular in-furrow. One trial had 3 previous soybean crops and 3 years since the last soybean crop. And the other trial had at least 4 previous soybean crops. Well, it had 4 previous soybean crops and 3 years since the last soybean crop. In these trials, we are evaluating nodulation at flowering. At flowering stage, we're counting the number of pink nodules. The pink color indicates that they're actively fixing nitrogen. Plants are rated on from 0 to 4 based on the number of nodules per plant, and 10 active nodules per plant is the minimum number for maximum yield potential. What do we see for yield? Well, each set of paired bars represents an on-farm trial, with the lighter green bar on the left of the pair representing the yield of the single inoculant strips, and the darker green bar on the right representing the yield of the double inoculant strips. And we have not seen any statistically significant yield responses where yield was improved with the double inoculation strategy compared to the single. With regards to nodulation ratings at flowering, it showed no significant differences between the double and the single inoculation strategies. Economically, if we say a granular inoculant is about $10 an acre and the liquid is another $3 per acre, then we need to see a consistent yield increase of about 0.8 bushels per acre to pay for the extra inoculant if soybeans are selling for $12 a bushel. Since we saw no yield improvement over the single inoculation, it would cost $10 per acre more. If moving to a single inoculation strategy is something you're curious in, we do have a checklist for moving that strategy based on field history, 2 previous well-nodulated soybean crops, and 1 within the last 4 years. Also note the no significant drought or flooding criteria. We have some research indicating these rhizobia will survive flooding and drought, and we do have a large on-farm network data set that has captured quite a few seasons with both of these conditions, and we're still not seeing a response to a double inoculation strategy, so it's worth revisiting that bullet. Also, if this is something you're curious about, you can absolutely run an on-farm trial before committing a change in strategy on every acre. The other soybean inoculation strategy we have investigated last year has been single inoculation versus none at all on fields with more soybean history. There were 2 of these trials in 2024 that are circled in purple on the map. In the single versus none trials, we're aiming to quantify the agronomic and economic impacts of a seed-applied inoculant versus no inoculant in soybean fields. With more soybean history, do we need to inoculate at all? And to participate in these trials, fields require a minimum of at least 3 previous soybean crops and soybean crops within the last 4 years in the rotation. Background information on these trials. These trials have compared a liquid on seed inoculant to no inoculant. The trials have used Signum soybean and nodulator products. The average seeding rates were around 210,000 seeds per acre for the one trial. We don't have data from the other one. And the plant stand counts were 158,000 plants per acre on those seeding rate. All were seeded with 10-inch row spacing. When we look at the yield results from these trials, there has not been a statistical yield response to a single inoculation strategy. No inoculant has performed the same as seed-applied inoculant when there have been 3 previous well-nodulating soybean crops on that field. These fields have naturalized populations of Bradyrhizobium japonicum that are effectively colonizing root nodules and fixing nitrogen in the untreated strips. In terms of economics, assuming a cost of $3 per acre for liquid on seed, we'd need to see a pretty small yield response of 1/4 of a bushel per acre to pay for that inoculant, and we have not seen it pay for itself yet. To wrap it up, what we recommend is to assess nodulation in every soybean field every year. And soybeans need a minimum of 10 nodules per plant to achieve 90% of maximum yield. Assessing nodulation at flowering can help inform management decisions ahead of pod fill when soybeans start to draw on a lot of nitrogen. It gives you some lead time to assess if a rescue nitrogen may be necessary. The number of nodules you're finding can feed into future inoculant decisions on that field as well. And also, as a reminder, that fields best suited to soybeans have at least 50 pounds per acre, have less than 50 pounds per acre of residual nitrogen to promote nodule growth and development. When nitrogen starts to get higher, soybeans start to get lazy and feed off of available nitrogen instead of spending the energy on creating nodules. Finally, using at least one form of inoculant, whether it's liquid on seed or granular, can still be a good idea to prevent nodulation failure. So if you're interested in learning more about these results, every trial result is available in the On-Farm Network database at manitobapulse.ca. And if you're interested in participating in a trial, get in contact with me. My information is up on the screen here. And thanks for listening. I'm Chris, the On-Farm Network agronomist. Follow us on social media to stay up to date.